Okay.
An extra one.
Cool. That works.
We have 6, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, 6. It's 6 and a bonus. The bonus is I've talked myself into a corner and I don't know what to do. Is the bonus.
Did anybody watch that first video of him, the first interview he did? I think the most fascinating part about that is the lycanthropy zoological study on that, because that guy with what's his name, Bob Knapp or something?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think they caught him as they were filming him halfway between his transition from human to werewolf.
He looks like Wolfman Jack or something, right?
Yeah, it's like his nephew or something.
Yeah.
Like he is to Wolfman Jack what Mark is to Ozzy Osbourne. All right, here we go. I'm Scott Rouse. I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I train law enforcement in the military in interrogation and body language, and I'm also a trial consultant. Chase?
Hey, I'm Chase Hughes. I've written a best-selling book on behavioral profiling. I teach behavioral profiling, enhanced influence, intelligence operations, and psychological warfare. I'm also a trial consultant here in the United States.
Excellent. Greg?
Greg Hartley. I'm a former Army interrogator, interrogation instructor, resistance to interrogation instructor. I've written a bunch of books on body language and behavior, and I spend most of my time in corporate America and on Wall Street.
Awesome. Mark?
I'm Mark Bowden. I'm an expert in human behavior and body language. I help people all over the world to stand out, win trust, and gain credibility every time they communicate.
Excellent. Well, today we're going to talk about Bob Lazar. And I'll play a little clip ahead of this to show everybody who he is, and just a real brief rundown of what's going on and why he's of interest, not only to us, but apparently a whole bunch of people that have watched our other videos.
Of his report, George Knapp introduces us to a local man with an amazing and disturbing story. George.
Gary and Mary Ruth, we've been working on this story for a long time, and we'll tell you right up front that it's going to be hard to swallow at first. Lazar's story is, by any standards, fantastic. He says he's telling it in order to protect himself. He says he was hired to work at an area called S4. At S4, he says, are flying saucers, antimatter reactors, and other working examples of technology that is seemingly beyond human capabilities.
Right, this came from somewhere else. I mean, as bizarre as that is to believe, but I mean, it's there. I saw it. I know what the current state of the art is in physics, and it can't be done.
All right, well, let's get to the first question or the first video and go from there.
But what did you do while you were there? If you're looking at this object, this reactor, and you can't figure out what it is or how it works, other than the fact that it works on this element that we don't even know about.
Sure. I mean, the thing was what you do with anything. If you're trying to analyze it, all you can do is perform tests. And all we did is try and come up with every kind of test we possibly could. I mean, we tested, it violated a lot of what we thought was impossible to violate. I mean, one of the first laws of thermodynamics, I mean, essentially any machine, any device that operates always makes extra heat. Nothing works at 100% efficient. Even the headphones you're wearing.
So right out of the gate, the thing that bothers me here is we're seeing somebody who is, over the years, he's mastered redirection. In other words, you'll ask him a question, he won't give you the answer. He'll talk about some stuff, and Greg always points this out, and I think he pointed this out to begin with. He brings in information that has nothing to do with the answer, and it's a lot more something you may not know about, be aware of. When he asks him, what did he do there? And the next thing you know, you're talking about thermodynamics. And he's talking about, and he says, and one thing that bothered me is he said one of the first laws of thermodynamics, there are 3 of them traditionally. And the first one talks about what he's talking about, the 2 types of heat, when you get into the details of that. But that just shows that he's redirecting. He does this quite often when he's in a spot like that. We also see what I call loping. When someone's talking, they're talking. There's a thing on Netflix now called Unsolved Mysteries. And in Unsolved Mysteries, there's some people who've been picked up by a UFO. They claim that. And there's an old woman on there that's talking. And if she's not telling the truth, it freaks me out, because that's the most honest-looking UFO story I've ever heard in my life. And hers is what does. Yeah. And hers is what she talks. It's loping when you see that, when you hear her talking. So that's what really bothers me with that. We see him do mercy hands, which is a lot of times you'll see him do this in frame. But when he's down like this, you'll see his thumbs turn. And mercy hands are when you hold your hands up and say, have mercy. You got to believe God. Please believe me. You've got to have mercy on me. Believe me. So we're seeing a little bit of that as well. We see it a couple of times throughout these things we'll be looking at. And then what else have I got? Yeah, I think that's good. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so I'm already starting to work on eye baselining here. Now, here's the interesting piece. He's told his story so many times. He's doing rote eye movement. So if I tell you a story a million times, I'm going to my base. I can tell you by watching enough of him, he's a right eye recall. So when his eyes are moving to his right, he's doing recall. By the way, about 90% of the population goes the opposite direction for some kind of recall. And all of his is rote. It's all auditory. If you guys remember me telling you, you can't have a cover story because everything is auditory and binary and there are no visual cues. No visual cues here, if you notice. It's all in the same place where it's auditory or visual. He gets asked a question, what did you do? Good job, Joe Rogan, by the way. Not many people ask hard questions. Great
he was
questions.
Great.
And, okay, now I'm going to be Greg and talk like Greg for a minute. If you ask me what I do, I'd say physicist shit if I couldn't come up with a better answer. But he didn't come up with a better answer. I would say tested magnetism, tested electricity, tested heat, tested. You could list any one of a number of things that a physicist would talk about. Instead, he goes, and he starts to move into what I call Scott, you hit it dead on, redirect, but I call it chaff and redirect because he just starts to puke information until he gets to a common denominator and sees that you understand it. And then when he gets down to that level, then he redirects. And it's an age-old thing. Once I get something that's factual that you believe, I can thread a lead that will cause you to pick up the next question. That starts me down the path of really starting to pay attention to his eyes and those pieces. And I'll loop back to this later in the show because I want you to pay attention to what he's doing to you when he's telling the story.
Excellent. Chase, what do you got?
So we saw the redirect, and he doesn't really answer the question. And a rule for you guys watching, if you ever redirect a story, make it really interesting. Because if it's interesting, it'll be great. And it's a lot easier to get the story across or get the answer out if it's interesting, which his was. I was riveted by this, learning about this alien machine. One thing you said, Scott, when his hands are like this, you said mercy hands. Mm-hmm. I think in that instance, he was trying to say that this is impossible. And I think his hands were open just to express, like, I have no idea what's going on here. And maybe just kind of a surrender, palm exposure kind of a thing. And one thing we see him do, Joe Rogan asked a question, what did you do? That's right. He starts with the pronoun, well, you have to do this. And when you see something like this, you have to investigate it. And he immediately makes a shift to we. I don't think one time in that segment that we just watched that he mentions himself. He
stammers before he says anything. What did you do? This is the pivotal moment in this guy's life, but he can't think of what he did for a good 7 seconds.
And one of the keys here for Joe Rogan was he doesn't say anything. He's like we're always wishing they would just shut up. He's not trying to talk every 5 seconds. He didn't get, so he just waits for that answer and he just keeps puking the whole time. Anyway, sorry about that, Chase.
Sorry. Very true. Yeah. And there's so many classes out there that teach deception detection that don't teach you how to ask questions, which really pisses me off because you can be like all of us watching body language. There's not a whole, I'll be the first one to say it. In this statement we just watched, there's not a whole lot of deception. There's maybe some memorization, which could be a truthful story, but he's made sure that he's got everything straight. But deception really comes out when we can do things on our side to raise the stakes, increase the anxiety about lying to us, and we're doing other things to question tiny parts of the story where he doesn't know whether or not we know the answer to something or not, like a bait question, which we've talked about in a previous video.
So Chase, I'll push back just one little bit here. When you say there's no deception, I think there's deception, but I don't think it's the classic kind where you try to lie your way out of something. I think it's he's trying to come up with an answer and he doesn't, and then he redirects. And redirecting to me is deception.
Right. I would say that's deception. I didn't say there's no deception. I said there's not a whole lot because I typically look for a cluster or a group of several indicators that absolutely I would absolutely say that that is an indicator of deception, but there's not a whole lot to stack up here. But so there is a likelihood that there is some deception here for sure.
Excellent. Mark?
Yeah, so great job by Joe Rogan there, but Bob Lazar is quite masterful at this. He's pretty well practiced at this. Here's what I see him doing, and it's the kind of stuff I'd train people to do. We do have those open palm gestures, which are used to go, you can believe me, I'm being honest with you because I've got no tools, no weapons, nothing in my hands. I'm a low-risk person to be around. So he's already starting this piece around, I'm low risk, you can trust me, essentially. Now, here's what he does. He goes big, violating the first law of thermodynamics. If all you can do is perform tests on something that violates one of the pivotal laws of universal physics, then all bets are off from now on. Like nothing can now conform to our usual idea about anything. And it means that anything down the road that I might want to poke at and provoke at, my mind is now, it's got nothing to latch onto anymore. And that's either true or false. Either we do have something in the universe that does not comply to the universal laws, or it's not true, but if we buy into it's true, it means we can't poke at the story anymore. It's a great opening gambit on this, and it's masterful, I would say.
Excellent. I'll tell you one more thing that bothers me about this is when he's talking about the first law, one of the first laws of thermodynamics, like I said before, there are only three. If he's supposed to be such an awesome physicist, he wouldn't say one of the first, because there's only three. You're going to say number 1, 2, or 3. Those are the traditional ones. There are a couple more. That's the part that bugs me a lot there. And then Chase, I agree with you on your part where you're saying it's impossible. But if you'll watch, you'll see the hands go down. See if I can do it. You see those hands turn right over in there as well. Watch that again if you get a chance, or when we flip around, and you'll see how that's the part I was talking about.
And I will say that I have some bias here. I want there to be aliens.
Me too.
Me too. Discover some stuff. I want some guy who gets elected president, he's going to read through these files and be like, holy crap, I've got to tell everybody. That's one of the first things I would do. Maybe one of the reasons I'm not president. But that'd be the first thing I'd do. I'd be like, all right, come on, meeting in my office, bring me all the alien crap, bring it all in here. So, I watched the movie Interstellar. I cried so many times during this movie. I was really into that stuff, and I want there to be aliens. So me watching this, I've got to admit my bias. I want to believe him.
Look, I want there to be something else because it means they've cooperated to be this smart to get here. And we seem to not be able to cooperate about what's good for dinner. So it would be a great thing. And I think that's human nature to want that. All of us here probably would love to see something. Now, there are things that do I believe there are UFOs? Yeah, the Navy has got some great footage of things that we can't explain. That doesn't mean that I have to believe his story to believe that story. That's a piece that we need to keep separate as we go through this. Right?
Yeah.
But what did you do while you were there? If you're looking at this object, this reactor, and you can't figure out what it is or how it works, other than the fact that it works on this element that we don't even know about.
Sure. I mean, the thing was what you do with anything. If you're trying to analyze it, all you can do is perform tests. And all we did is try and come up with every kind of test we possibly could. I mean, we tested, it violated a lot of what we thought was impossible to violate. I mean, one of the first laws of thermodynamics, essentially any machine, any device that operates always makes extra heat. Nothing works at 100% efficient. Even the headphones you're wearing, anything.
All right. Everybody good?
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Now, you said there's 9 of them, and you got a brief glimpse at the other ones. How were they different?
Oh, they looked completely different. One looked like I called a Jell-O mold, and it looked like a classic Jell-O mold with the rippled sides to it. One was a very flat disc, like a straw hat or something like that. That was sitting up on its edge, and the thin part of it looked like a projectile had been fired through the edge of it. So I don't know if they were attempting to see if the metal could be penetrated, or if that's where the thing came from. Maybe it was shot down. But that was the only one where I saw there was, actual physical damage to it.
And that one was roughly the same size? They
were kind of too far away to tell.
All right, Greg, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'll just hit a couple of these. Here's him telling a story that he's doing rote. Remember, I told you, and you're going to see in later video, I'm going to see him making up details when he first starts the story, and he's up visual cues in the left side of his head and all that. Here it's all rote. It's all to his right in the center, right in what I typically refer to as the sound processing portion of your face, between your brow ridge and your cheekbone, somewhere in there. And he's accessing, he'll rote, he'll come back, he may make eye contact. He knows this story inside out. He's been telling this for 30 years. He's the Susan Lucci of the UFO world. I mean, he's been doing the same role for so long, he's got it down. And so he's giving these details. There's a couple interesting pieces here. When he's asked, is there any damage? Yes, there's one that has a 4 or 5 inch hole that's sitting up on its side. There's a little bit of a disconnect here between his facts for me. If I know how big the hole is, and I'm a physicist, I can pretty damn well tell you how big the craft is. If that makes sense to you. I don't care how far away I am from it. I can extrapolate, hey, it's this big and it's 1/50th of this. But he says it's 52 feet, and then he goes on to talk about how he knows what size these things are. But here he is dancing around the topics. He's ready for the questions they're going to answer, and he's just hitting rote. Bump, bump, bump. That's important because I want you to pay attention to, he's always, we talk about baseline, he's always recalling to his right. Always. You may ask him a probing question. He may go down to his left as he's having internal conversation. Nothing is ever up here. Nothing. Nothing is ever any place but here or straight on. And it's really key here that you pay attention to this rote as we move forward. And I'll leave the rest to you guys because there's a ton in here. But for me, that's the most important piece we locked down right here.
Okay, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so as I was telling you guys earlier, I've been working with somebody who's been sending me a video of them talking about a virtual experience. And there's some huge similarities around how they talk about that virtual experience and how they talk about real experiences that they've had. And you could look at this person and go, I think they're telling the truth. And they are telling a truth of sorts. But how I know that it didn't really happen is that there's inconsistencies in the story. The story doesn't make sense for the world as I know it. Now, Lazar is clever because he's invoked the first law of thermodynamics. It doesn't work anymore. So all bets are off. But let me just tell you what is inconsistent with the way I know the universe works. I know that the universe has a level of consistency to it. When I look at human beings, they're roughly 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head in roughly the same place as me. When I'm spotting aeroplanes, and I've seen some craft which are pretty new and pretty exciting, they've got wings. And they got a tail, and there's stuff there. And Chase, I know you were in the Navy. And I know there are lots of different ships or boats out there, but my guess would be is everyone that you've seen has had some form of a hull. There is a consistent raise of the eyebrows there, and he's giving me a little slow blink there to say, yeah, they roughly all have a hull, and even the ones that come out of the water, the hull comes out of the water as the aquaplanes lift it out. Here's what is interesting. There's 9 different aircraft, and they're all completely different. They're all completely different. I would suggest the universe doesn't work like that. They would have some massive similarities to them. Massive similarities. They'd have more similarities than they'd ever have differences because that's the way the universe works. But here's the problem. That theory doesn't work anymore because the first law of thermodynamics wasn't even functioning within this lot. So you can now come back at me and go, well, Mark, just the universe, when we're around these aircraft, these ships, these craft, the fundamental laws of physics do not apply anymore. And that's a brilliant way that means that I can't touch this story. I can't nudge this story. I can't find the inconsistency in it because the fundamental laws aren't there. And if I was trying to get somebody to be unable to crack my story, the first thing I'd do is hit a fundamental law and keep taking them back to that to say, normal rules don't apply on this one. Anyway, that's my end on that one.
Wow, that's good. Chase, what do you got?
I look for truth signals. So on here, let's start with that. The way that he is using his rote memory, as Greg said, and granted, I think Greg, for all four of us, and probably thousands of our listeners, has sold us, and just even us, and we're experts in the field. I've been sold more than I ever have been before on the eye movement thing. So we're seeing him go to home on a regular basis. He's just looking that direction. But the use of what I call body narration, where he's narrating the story and he's talking about the craft and the circles in it and using his eyes and looking at his hands, which is important for body narration. So somebody's describing something and their hands are just doing this and they say, oh, it was massive, versus someone looking at it, it's just this massive space and their eyes and hands move together. He has that, which is a pretty solid truth signal. One of the things that we see that might be deceptive here, in agreement with both of you guys, that he's invoked this thing. It is completely different. All these crafts were completely different. In another video, he says they were slightly different. In the video he did back in the 80s, he describes them a little bit differently. And that's kind of all we're seeing here. We're seeing eyes and body move together in unison, which is a good truth signal. But we're also seeing, if he was doing some kind of a visual recall of what these things look like, his eyes probably wouldn't move to the exact same direction that he remembers getting a phone call.
Oh, guys, just to give you an example, all of you watching, you've watched one more of our videos. Think of the first time you saw us, which direction were each of us in, and where were we on the panel? Just think for a minute of that. Think of Prince Andrew. Think of the thing that you remember most about him. And watch your eyes dance around in your head. They're going to move to a visual accessing cue. Mark, you just did it. Your eyes moved up. You moved up into the visual cortex. Can't go into the back of your head, so they start looking up to try to find space. Guys, this is human behavior. It's why we know when a story is full of it.
Excellent. All right. Well, you guys covered pretty much everything. What I'll do is, and I want to say this about when we're giving people tips, we're saying, here's what's happening here. For example, the other day when Chase said, here's some tips on whatever it was he was saying. We got a comment where somebody said, why is Chase giving you all tips on this and that? The tips we give aren't for each other.
Right.
We do this so we can teach people how to do what we're doing, so they can see things pop out when we talk about. They'll see those and understand what they are. So we say, here's a tip on this, or like what Greg just did, but you prefaced it with it's for everybody that's watching, or for the person watching. That's what we're doing. So when one of us says, here's a tip, it's for you. It's not for us.
But we are learning from each other.
Yeah, I'll take all the help I can get.
Same here. We learn from each other, for sure. I learned something in every. What's good about using four people, we all approach this from a different angle. And, it keeps us from doing something that is just, oh, yeah, and. I think we will find things that are different. So I think that's an important point, though, Scott. This is for you, not for us.
Yeah, exactly. Because here are a couple of tips. Let's talk about illustrators for a minute. Illustrators are the gestures you make with your hand, with your eyebrows, with your body when your brain is trying to emphasize specific words and phrases. Like I just did, just say specific words and phrases. If I were to say specific words and phrases and my illustrators don't hit on those words, then there's an issue there. Something's not as it should be. So that's what we're seeing here when he's describing the damage that's done on the ship, or on the craft, as he calls it. So we see that, and then his illustrators, most of them are right on the money, but those that aren't start dealing around the damage. And he also, when he talks about the damage, he pushes it away as he's talking about it too. He starts his illustrators up here and works his way down, but then it looks like he's pushing away, as some people would say, he's pushing away the false, the deception. Whether you believe that or not, I don't know. But so that's what we're seeing there. And that's what sort of bugs me about that is seeing that. And so it lets me know if I were to see someone tell me that, if I was in an interrogation situation, I would know. It wouldn't mean they're lying or telling the truth. I would just know they're unsure about that information.
Scott, I work in business as much as anything. And when I'm sitting across the table from someone and I hear them throw a word away, I want to know their commitment. I'll probe and say, why don't you throw that away? Or what do you really mean by that? Because you're right. It doesn't have to be an interrogation. We all do this in the real world too. I've had people ask me, well, isn't the real world different from interrogation? No, it's not. Actually, it is much more useful in the real world than when I'm sitting across from you and looking scary. If I'm a normal guy talking to you, not that I'm a normal guy, but if I'm a normal guy talking to you, then it's a lot easier for me to use these tools. And Scott, I think you're dead on there. That's the key.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Now, you said there's 9 of them, and you got a brief glimpse at the other ones. How were they different?
Oh, they looked completely different. One looked like I called a Jell-O mold, and it looked like a classic Jell-O mold with the rippled sides to it. One was a very flat disc, like like a straw hat or something like that. That was sitting up on its edge, and the thin part of it looked like a projectile had been fired through the edge of it. So I don't know if they were attempting to see if the metal could be penetrated, or if that's where the thing came from. Maybe it was shot down. But that was the only one where I saw there was, actual physical damage to it.
And that one was roughly the same size? They're all...
They were kind of too far away to tell.
All right. Everybody good?
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Did you see just one type or different types?
There were 9 total. I only got to essentially work, back engineer, or analyze one of the craft. But there was a separate hangar for each of the crafts, and each one was essentially different in its visual appearance.
Did anybody tell you where the U.S. Navy intelligence got the craft from?
No, not at all. That's a lot of people have speculated about it, that they were either shot down or they crashed, but the craft seem undamaged, so I doubt either of those would be correct.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
So we see something here that I think is, I'll give you the truthful part first. Back in this video, he's doing this, I haven't calculated the number of years. A couple of decades prior, 20 years some odd prior to his appearance on Joe Rogan. Same story, different words. That speaks to truth. Same story, same words is more likely to be a rehearsed story. The deceptive part that I see in this interview, if someone looks away, not just with their eyes, but with their skull, so we see eyes and skull looking together, as they're looking away, they're retrieving some data or experiencing some kind of feeling, that's when they'll start talking. In this video, we see an eye and head break away, and then he looks back to deliver the information. So I think this is the deliberate recall of something that he has memorized that is not truthful.
Excellent. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so you're starting now to see, number one, yes, Chase, while I agree with you, he is saying the same words, he's using different facts. This is in direct contradiction to what he says to Rogan. There was damage in one of these aircraft. Well, he hasn't been there since before this. So there's a fact issue right here. You can't have multiple facts in one story. That part I have a problem with, number one, just on his face. But watch him. I believe, and I think this is 2009. Wait until we're going to go back to 1989 as well, which is his first time, and you're going to see him building his story. That thing that the Susan Lucci role he's playing now, that he's played for 30 years, that he knows that role inside out, is building. And every time he's probed and poked, he's coming up with more details so that by the time he gets to Joe Rogan, he is much more believable, which is why if you watch Joe Rogan and you thought, hey, this guy's the real deal, I don't doubt it. When you first look at it with face value, without understanding his eyes are moving to the same spot constantly, that he has developed this story over 30 years and he's playing Erica over and over and over, you don't get the this piece of it. So when you go in to look at him, pay attention to he's moving around. It's not just his head. He's jitterbugging as he's trying to come up with answers for this guy. And there's almost a little amusement going on in his face as he does it. And as we go further back, you're going to find even more of that as he's filling in these details that will become those permanent words that we're talking about, Chase. I think he's a master storyteller. He missed his calling, or maybe he didn't. He is a master storyteller. I wish I believed him because, like you said, I really want to believe this. I want to believe we've got some little guys who are telling us how to do the world better sitting in a cave somewhere. I just don't think so.
Yeah, that's great. The thing about the moving around the chair, and he's nodding every time he starts talking about the 9 ships and all that, he's giving that confirmation of, yeah, and he's dead-eyeing this guy. And he's also wiggling around his chair as he's doing it. So it shows he's a little bit nervous about it, but at the same time trying to make sure he sells it well. You know, that's all I've got. You guys have covered everything. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so one of the things you might want to do if you're looking for somebody and that they may be nervous around deceit is put them in a chair that moves easily, because you will find they'll start swinging on that thing, they'll tip it around, they'll do all kinds of stuff. If you've given them furniture where they can lock themselves in really hard, they'll be looking more calm and assertive. In this one, we don't get the super calm and assertive, modern Bob Lazar. We got a mid-period Bob Lazar here, the artist known as, and he's doing a great job. But we've got some of those vocal tics coming in, which again it gives him time to come up with his story. He's still making a sound. It clears the throat there because it's getting a bit dry. He's under stress and pressure. So, and look out for that rhythm as well. Think about Scott's idea there of the loping. It's got a rhythm. It's got a smooth gallop to it. It suddenly gets very sticky in areas around this. Now, we do see it in some of the stuff with Joe Rogan. He does hit that again. And what he does, and again, this is a beautiful technique that you must pay attention to. What he does is he starts to say that he's got a migraine. When he gets off his story, he starts to say, I've got a migraine. And he's already prepared this because he's told everybody in the studio and his partner there that there's a migraine going on. It's very like Uri Geller used to do. Uri Geller, if it was going wrong for him, would say, I don't feel strong tonight. I don't feel strong. And migraines, though we do know a lot about why they exist and how you get them, it's one of those things you can't touch. You can't go, come on, man, it's just a migraine. Like, come on, pull yourself together. It's just a migraine. The moment somebody says, I've got a migraine, we all, back off and go, okay, we'll all get off then. Yeah, absolutely. You're in the military. yeah. Get over it. Greg, don't interrogate me now. I've got a migraine. Can you, take it easy on me? Yeah, of course, you'd still go for it. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up in that he's using the mid-period. He's doing pretty well, certainly a lot better than we see in the early period, where we will start to see the mouth really moving about all over the place. But check in with some of that Joe Rogan stuff to see where he starts to invoke the idea of, I'm not in good physical or mental shape right now. And that's why you might feel there's some inconsistency in my ideas. That's my take on it.
Brilliant. Excellent. Yeah, and I know that Chase and Greg will agree with me on this because in interrogation training, when you talk about when someone said, Mark hit it right on the nail on the head, the dream situation for someone, their sitting situation, is a chair that swivels with wheels on it. I mean, that'd be wonderful. It was like if we made that the law, because you learn so much from that. And a lot of times if I get to do a lot of financial things. And so in those rooms, they've got those really nice chairs, and you sit there and talk to them. They're wiggling all over the place, and that leg gets to going. Oh, it's beautiful. So yeah, Mark, you nailed that.
Did you see just one type or different types?
There were 9 total. I only got to essentially work, back engineer, or analyze one of the craft.
but there was a separate hangar for each of the crafts, and each one was essentially different in its visual appearance.
Did anybody tell you where the U.S. Navy intelligence got the craft from?
No, not at all. That's a lot of people have speculated about it, that they were either shot down or they crashed, but the craft seem undamaged, so I doubt either of those would be correct.
Is everybody good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
One of the 9 flying discs he says he saw at the base, which was designated S4, looks exactly like this UFO photographed in Europe. Lazar called it the sport model.
I gave everything simple names. There's the top hat one, and the Jello mold, and the sport model operated without any hitches at all. I mean, it looked new. If I know what a new flying saucer looks like. One of them looked like it was hit with some sort of projectile. It had a large hole in the bottom and a large hole in the top with the metal bent out, like some sort of large caliber 4 or 5 inch projectile had gone through it.
So, okay. Well, right here, I know you guys got a ton of stuff about this one, but he didn't, when he talks about the specifics of the hole, remember on the Joe Rogan one, he talks about how this ship is on its edge and how you can see he doesn't do this number because he says it came from the bottom and went up. Then he would have said from the side this way. So that tells me that's an inconsistency there. Again, I want to believe this cat's telling the truth, but this shows me deception in the comparative view of the past and the present, talking about that. And he uses his hands to create that picture. And like as Chase was saying before, that's so important because he's building. I don't know if he's looking at him. I didn't notice that, but he's creating that picture in your mind, so you'll have that as he tells the story. That's why he's a good storyteller as well, Greg, because as he tells the story, he builds it and he starts making pictures for you. Again, when we're building pitches for entrepreneurs, one of the things you do is you want to build a picture they can take out of their head and then go home and pop it in their wife's head or their husband's head, because they're going to say, what did you do? What happened today? You're going to invest in whatever it was? And I'm thinking about it. Yeah. Why? Because if you're going to put $300,000 or $1.2 million in that thing, you got to be able to explain that to your person. You got to be able to nail it. So they go, oh, it sounds good to me, because you're not pitching to the husband or the wife or the other person. You're pitching to that person, and you've got to give him something to take home. And that's what he's doing. He's giving us some things to take home and think about later. When you think about that whole, not this, but in the other one, it should have been that way, if that makes sense. All right, Chase, what do you got?
I agree. And I will say in disagreement with one thing, that the building the pictures, I would not classify as a strong deceptive behavior. I speak like that naturally. I write fiction. So when I talk about stories, I want you in it. So if I'm telling you about some cool party, I'm telling you about the towing the kids on the boat in the tube, I'm gonna try to get you in there as much as I can. I'm gonna talk about the wake and all the boats out there on the lake on the 4th of July. All that's going to be in there. And the inconsistency that you pointed out, Scott, in this video, I imagined a ground artillery unit shooting a 5-inch shell upward through the craft. In his previous one on Joe Rogan, I imagined them performing this test in the lab from the side. So I think that's a very interesting thing to take note of. It's a good data point here. And I've waited for who knows what reason to challenge Greg on the rote, and maybe I'm scared. I've been reading Greg for 10 years before I got to meet this guy.
Here we go. All right, just a second. All right. Let's do this.
Memorization. Mm-hmm. I think there is a possibility that this guy, as brilliant as he is, I think he may be on the spectrum.
Wait till the next video.
So with this possibility, this rote memorization could be a result of him from the age of 4 onward building a mask and how people like to hear stories. How do mom and dad, what makes their eyebrows go up, what makes them squeeze me? All of this, we're developing masks. So he's just remembering techniques to communicate instead of being deceptive. And I'm just saying that that's a possibility. I'm not saying that there's an absence of deception.
And you know what? So I accept the challenge and love that. I do think that there are anomalies, right? I would not say this is a guy doing this, except you'll see in the next few videos, he's not always been that way. And once you memorize, here's the problem, guys, cover stories. Cover stories, I'm going to show you very quickly why a cover story doesn't work. When I remember something, I remember the 9th word of the Star Spangled Banner or the 5th word of Stairway to Heaven, whatever word it is, and try to remember that, watch your eyes. 90% of you are going to go slightly up and to your left. 10% are going to go slightly up and to your right. That's just the way we're wired. It's not absolute. You have to figure it out in every person. I'm going to ask you another question. Remember your kindergarten teacher. What did he or she look like? Watch your eyes dance up into your head as you recall a visual cue, and it's going to be left or right. That's how we work. That's how we are wired. None of us do this. We don't all go to the same auditory cue over and over and over. But, and Mark, you being an acting coach and an actor, you know this. People who act, I call it play acting. People who play act don't have emotions. They have words. People who act internalize it and it comes out as part of who they are. And so they feel and their eyes move and they sense. And it's how you can tell a good actor from a bad one. The people who just memorize lines, they all go, because they're repeating the lines. Watch a bad actor on stage. Go to a high school play and look for the good actors and the bad actors. The bad ones are going to be standing there regurgitating Shakespeare with no feeling. The guys who get it, they're feeling what they're saying because they're internalizing it. And so watch this guy, because what you're going to see is in his younger years, when you ask him a question he doesn't know the answer to, he's going to have to go and make it up, and his eyes are going to deviate dramatically from what he's doing on Joe Rogan. Watch. And I think, yes, there can be deviations, and I agree with you, Chase, 100%. A person can have an anomaly of a body language, and you have to look for it. That's why we looked for it, and we got it. You'll see it.
Excellent. And Chase, I agree with you on the part about when you're there, you're building those things. He knows that. That's why he's creating that picture for you to take home.
Yep. I'm not a visual guy. Look, tiny little eyes, big ears. I'm an auditory guy. I love stories that have, both your points, that have details, because I don't care about looking at things. I care about, one, to know what happened and how it went and that kind of thing. So both, you're right. I mean, it's about building that picture. And I agree with you. He knows that he's building a picture for you to take home, Scott.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah. Mark, do you want to gang up on Chase with us?
No, not at all.
Let me respond to that real quick. That if someone is memorizing a mask or building a mask, they'll still go to a memorized line or a memorized pattern of behavior, which could make their eyes move in the same direction.
Sure. Yeah, but all this memorization going the same place all the time is why cover stories don't work, because when I ask you what you did last Tuesday and you go to auditory memory.
Yeah, then we see a deviation.
Yeah.
Okay. Mark, what do you got?
You may be about to see.
Yeah, so I would say one of the biggest differences for me, this is early artist Bob Lazar compared to the artist that we have right now. Go and watch him now, and there is a smoothness to it. There's a calm assertiveness to it, rather like you get from a quality performer. Okay, in this early version, it's super staccato. And think about when Chase was telling us about the wake of the boat and how smooth that was. And yeah, Chase, I think your accent is originally maybe Texan. I'm not quite sure, and Texan does have, a smoothness to it. But even so, Chase was elongating the words because he wanted to make sure that we really felt it as well. Bob in this last video is super staccato. He's just trying to get through it. Now, what he does do in both of these is what we call nested loops, where he starts a story, doesn't finish it, starts another, doesn't finish it, and then drops into something where he finishes that. And what that causes us to do is to grab hold of anything that he gives us. The US has a president at the moment which uses those same nested loops as well. So we kind of go, what was that about? What was that? Oh, that bit I get. And it gives a great deal of satisfaction, and it means we'll grab hold of elements of story that normally we'd go, you know what? Well, that doesn't seem accurate to me. So we've got to know that throughout this work that Bob Lazar has been doing, he's been skilled to an extent right from the start. It's just when he gets in front of Joe Rogan, arguably biggest show on earth right now, stakes are high, and Joe Rogan needs to keep that high because Joe Rogan now has one of the best rating shows. So of course you got to get Bob Lazar on. Of course, it's like it's an act. It's the act. You got to have Bob Lazar on the show, and at that point, Bob's a serious player now, a serious player, and that's why when I look through the majority of how he's talking, I think like Chase, and I think like everybody else, I see some incredible elements of truth to it.
I'll be his champion here for just a second. When he did say realm, he did preface that with, this is a very poor way to describe this.
And guys, if you'll watch him, this is my only little snippet about him, not about mine and your back and forth, Chase. A couple of things. He is moving around. He is accessing. His eyes are going up left that you don't see at any point in the Joe Rogan story. Now, either one of two things is true. If he's recalling and his eyes are going here, then he is not recalling when he is going here. So one or the other of those is deceptive and clearly deceptive. And you don't have to believe in eye movement. You just have to believe that baseline matters. You don't have to believe that what I do works, but you do have to believe that if a person always does this and they suddenly stop, that means something. We all believe that. And you're going to find, I'll give you a great thing to do on the Rogan show. Turn it on fast forward and turn the sound off and watch him touch his face. I got a list of where he touches his face. They're all contentious issues. That means something. Does it always mean something? No. But if he only does it when it's contentious, it means something.
You know, if he watches this and then we see him again, we're going to be, wow, this cat, I'm in. There are UFOs.
Welcome to the show. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we'd love to see you and prove us wrong.
Yeah.
One of the 9 flying discs he says he saw at the base, which was designated S4, looks exactly like this UFO photographed in Europe. Lazar called it the sport model.
I gave everything simple names. There's the top hat one, and the Jello mold, and the sport model operated, without any hitches at all. I mean, it looked new. If I know what a new flying saucer looks like. One of them looked like it was hit with some sort of projectile. It had a large hole in the bottom and a large hole in the top with the metal bent out, like some sort of, large caliber 4 or 5 inch projectile had gone through it.
All right. Everybody good?
Yeah.
Let's move on.
So you were seeing what it could do, but you couldn't ever figure out how it was doing it.
No, not really. I mean, we really could only use come up with a best guess. Now, I can't say we really that I could absolutely state for certainty how anything actually worked.
All right, Greg, you want to go first?
Yeah, this one is a little different. He's asking a question, a direct question. Did anybody hear an answer?
No.
To me, this is a red flag kind of an answer, and there are quite a few of these in Rogan's in his response to Rogan. He stammers and he's looking for space. He stares at him, he moves his eyes around, but he really doesn't have anything to add back. This is a follow-on, I think, to, hey, what did you do every day? But in this one, I don't see him answering anything. I see him deferring the question, dancing around, pushing away. And to your point, Mark, I think this is one of the places where he said, I have a migraine, and he backs away from it. Mm-hmm. He puts up his force field because he's just lost the ability to answer. But again, look, if I'm thinking about how much work I put into something, I would expect to see an emotional or some other kind of I put a lot of work into it and we didn't discover anything. There's a lot of inconsistencies in this whole story. Among my favorites, and you can take this out or leave it in, is how did you turn the thing on? You put this little dome over this little tower for the reactor and it came on, and then you couldn't touch it. Well, how the hell do you turn it off if that's the case? If you can't take the dome back off, how do you turn it off? So there's a whole lot of weirdness in this story that a good interrogator would go, hold on, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but if that's how you turn it on, how do you turn it off? And you don't have to put that in. But there's a lot of that goes on in this story because, to your point, Mark, well, of course, it's a spaceship. It's a different thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I agree with you on the flag. He's trying to find his usual spot. He's been placed in his spot to answer a question, but there's no place to redirect. He can't get a hold of it yet, I don't think. I can tell that Chase is going to come in and go, here? No. What do you got, Chase?
I actually agree on the counts here. So you guys have all seen my behavioral table of elements. It's my stab at creating maybe the first system, the only system. I was just trying to codify deception and human behavior, just my attempt at it. And on that behavioral table, we say we've got to have a score of an 11 for deception to be about pretty much very likely. And right here we have an 8. So we see 2 behaviors that are a score a 4, which is the highest score that one behavior can get. So the first one, we see a non-answer. If you ask someone a question and they don't answer directly, that is a non-answer statement. So it's not an answer. And second, we see something called a postural retreat, where at the end here, I think just after this video, he kind of leans back and he's a little bit resigned. And it's almost a kind of a defensive gesture. We see Nixon do this when he says, "I'm not a crook." And he steps back from the podium, crosses his arms. So we see this postural retreat that happens after the deceptive statement, which is when it's most likely to happen. So we see 2 of those, which gives him a score of an 8 out of an 11. So we have most likely deception for this.
Excellent. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah,
Can I ask one question of Chase first? Do you have element 115 on your chart?
Yeah. You need to add a new gesture for element for that element. Yeah. But that element only lasts for microseconds in the real universe. But in Bob Lazar universe,
we got boxes
you can get a big lump.
The unobtainable. It's the unobtainable.
Yeah, you can get a big lump of it. By the way, I do want to say, if for everybody watching, get Chase's table of elements. It's really, really.
But be careful with that. You got to be careful, because my front lobe got pummeled when I first got that. I was like, you got to be kidding me. How long did that take, man? How long did that take, Chase? Yeah. Years?
9 years.
Oh. Guys, I think before we let Mark finish up this one, this is a great opportunity. Each of us has a very different approach to get to the same thing. And what we want you to hear is the reason we like working with each other. I'm the sharp stick and a sandy beach guy. I want to quick get my answer right now. When I profile people, I'm like, why is that different? I don't do something as methodical as Chase does. Every one of us brings a little different twist to this, which is why I think we're a great team. And I really applaud that.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Lovely.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
So let me tell you what I see.
Element 115 is. Hold on.
Yeah, go.
Watch it; they'll raid your house.
Let me tell you what I see here. Is he's asked, how does it work? And here's what happens. Is that Joe Rogan sets him up for the here's how it works routine, and Lazar packs the hell out. Basically, he's going, I don't do that routine anymore. I don't do the how it work acts anymore. And the reason I think he doesn't do that is we now know too much about Higgs bosons and particle accelerators, and your general layperson has a pretty good idea, because what he'd say in earlier stuff is you have to remember anti-gravity, it warps time and space. Okay, so people didn't know that at that time. So when he says you have to remember, he's basically telling you all bets are off because this is gravity and gravity will warp everything. So we don't buy that anymore because we know a little bit better as lay people how this science works. I don't think you'd get Bob Lazar anymore to tell you how it works. And he would have told you 20 years ago exactly how it works. And that is a red flag for me.
Yeah. And in that flag, you'll see him panicking, because I think that's what we're seeing as well. When he starts getting back and starts closing down. His illustrators from the get-go on that, his illustrators are small. He hardly moves. You see some movement, you can't tell exactly what it is. And his illustrators somewhere on, but they're very small compared to what he usually does when he answers. So
can't finish a sentence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were seeing what it could do, but you couldn't ever figure out how it was doing it.
No, not really. I mean, we really could only use come up with a best guess. Now, I can't say we really that I could absolutely state for certainty how anything actually worked.
All right, everybody good?
Did they contain any information about the history of mankind, the alien involvement in the history of mankind?
Not really. Nothing that said, well, this is the way things were. There was mention of alien intervention in the past. I mean, extremely long ago. Something along the lines of millions of years ago. For the information that I looked at, it seemed that, and there again, these are briefing documents, so I can't myself ascertain whether or not these are true. I can only assume it because the briefing documents I read that pertain to the propulsion system were true because I dealt with that. But they did make reference to contact with the Earth over 10,000 years ago, also with genetic alterations that ended in a simian being, and all kinds of claims.
All right. Yeah, right out of the gate there, he starts, when he asks him that question, he starts off with no, basically. There's not much at all. Then he starts getting into the history of humankind, starts talking about things that happened millions of years ago that were in the documents or whatever he's talking about in there. Then he goes on to talk about how talks about 10,000 years and becoming simian beings. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. He's creating that on the fly. I think we're seeing him make that up as he goes, because who would have asked him that before? How would he have thought that up? So I think we're seeing him create something as he goes. So Greg, as to your eye accessing, wherever he's looking there, he's looking down to his right, I think.
Down to his right.
Yep. He's creating right there, man.
Well, yeah, but emotional content, right? That's a I'm on the ropes move. That's not he's creating intellectually. He's on the ropes, right? When I get you and start punching you in the gut, you go to emotion. His brain is kind of jumping around like a squirrel in the road a little bit. He starts off with not really, but tongue out. And this is not a grooming move. This is a uh-oh. And then he goes to internal conversation, scrambling back and forth. Anytime you're looking at somebody and they're down and they're back and forth, they are scrambling back and forth with internal conversation. Watch his respiration increase. It's dramatic. He's all, Chase, you always say it, he's breathing heavily in his upper chest and his respiration increases. He starts to distance and push himself further and further away from whatever he's going to say by saying, this was in something somebody else had written, and so I can't attest to how true it is, but I can attest to how true what I read on my side was. Well, why would you have reason to doubt that? Number one, he's pushing himself up. He even puts his force field up as he holds his hands up and says, figuratively, I can't be held responsible for that. This is prime. This is early in the game, early enough he's not gotten to rote memory, and he's still defending himself. Scott, I think we have one in here of even earlier, like 1989, when he's really young and he's moving his eyes around and all that. But he is scrambling. That's squirrel in the road right there when you see him go down right. He's having an internal conversation and feeling it, and you can see the respiration increase and the dodging and ducking, and then the force field.
All right. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so this is the early artist at work very much. And by the time we get to Rogan, he's masterful and he's had all these questions. This is the artist sketching it out. He's like, he hasn't had this question before. And the interviewer's kind of gone, do you have a song about flowers? And he's gone, no, I don't do flowers. And then he's gone, yeah, actually,
why not?
I'll do one for you right now. All right, how does it begin? So it's exactly so non-verbally, what we get at the start is lots of vocal tics. We've got lots of shrugs. We've got this one side of the mouth stretching out here. In the really early version, he'll go from side to side to side to side. He's super nervous early on, but he's written a few of these songs already, and some have gone down really well. He just hasn't done this one. So there's inconsistency for a start. Millions of years, tens of thousands of years. The document can't have said both. Okay. Then he excuses the document by going, some of the document may have been just false information for security reasons. So there's a get out of that, like pay no attention to that line. That line's a bit rubbish. And there's a good reason why there's. And then I think here's what happens. He gets into the rhythm of it. And he gets into the rhythm of it because he starts to do very basic universal mythology, or what you'd hear Eric von Däniken do, I think, who was writing in the 60s previous. He starts to regurgitate, I think, some of the von Däniken stories, essentially, and the idea of the mating of the ethereal thing with the human thing in order to get something superior and yet human. It's the gods mating with, it's fire from the gods. It's Prometheus.
History Channel.
Yeah, exactly. It's Prometheus, and of course that's a beautiful, interesting story, and it hits us on a very fundamental level, and so we kind of tune into that and go, well, we'll forgive you that this is clearly the first time you've ever written this song, but it's a good song. I like this. However badly you sing the song, the premise of the song is a beautiful song. The gods made love to us, and we had children. It's a great song. So goodish early work, but easy to see. He had never written this one before. And again, I don't think you get him singing that song now. I think if you go to the Rogan show, I'm not. I don't think he does that number. He's not doing that album anymore.
Yeah. All right, Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, he's taking that off his set list.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Mark, we call those Humalians.
Didn't you learn anything from?
That's the term for that.
I'd forgotten. Yes.
Wow.
I agree with all of you guys. I think there is some deception here.
Mark, don't you watch our videos, man? Every Thursday.
Not nearly enough.
Thursday.
Not nearly enough.
Okay. Okay, every Thursday. Okay, Chase, sorry, man.
I do think there's some deception here. And I agree with everything you guys said. I'm not going to just piggyback onto it. But if you saw the history of mankind, you're not going to be kicked back in a chair. I wish I was wearing glasses like he was, like you guys are, because I'd be like, oh, holy crap. Let me tell you what I saw in these papers. It's going to blow your mind. That would be my reaction. I would be so excited to tell you this is why we're here. Experimentation, this DNA modification that goes back thousands of years to create who we are today. And then it was a nervous, contrived conversation.
Well, he didn't have an answer is really what it boils down to. I think to your point, nothing in his set list, and he just has to reach around and pull it out. And when he does, what he finds is not easy to describe. So he's rambling and making up stuff and just pulling words together. We talked about AI being able to tell deception. None of these words would find their way into an AI patterning. It's just stuff he's scrambling.
Okay. Does anybody see this little hair up here? Looks like I've got an antenna.
I do now. I can't not look at it now. You shouldn't have said that.
I know. It's like I've got a direct line to that woman we talked about.
Like you're attached to a particle accelerator right now.
Van de Graaff's.
Yeah. That's probably talking to me.
That's an energy weapon.
Yeah.
Did they contain any information about the history of mankind, the alien involvement in the history of mankind?
Not really. Nothing that said, well, this is the way things were. There was mention of alien intervention in the past. I mean, extremely long ago. Something along the lines of millions of years ago. For the information that I looked at, it seemed that, and there again, these are briefing documents, so I can't myself ascertain whether or not these are true. I can only assume it because the briefing documents I read that pertain to the propulsion system were true because I dealt with that. But they did make reference to contact with the Earth over 10,000 years ago, also with genetic alterations that ended in a simian being, and all kinds of claims.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Areas. It's difficult to really surmise how long it had been operational. Everything did look fairly new. By that I mean I don't think this installation was there in the early 70s. Nothing was worn. Things look fairly freshly painted. So, as a ballpark guess, I would say it would really surprise me if the installation was older than 5, 7, 10 years, something like that.
Okay, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so this is where we see super early days for him. Sides of the mouth, one side goes up, the other side goes up, the other side goes up, the other side goes up. He's all over the place. Here's what I'd say that you should do watching this, is think about just listening to what he's talking about there. Just listen to it. At the end of listening to it, think, does that seem credible? Is there some doubt in my instinct around this? Then go back and watch it and notice what simply showing an aerial photograph of maybe Area 51. I don't even know whether there were at that point any aerial photographs available, but just showing something that seems to be solid. If we want to believe in this idea, and even if we don't, it lends such credibility when we show that aerial photograph. Even just take that aerial photograph out and watch him again and think, does this feel credible? Does it seem credible to me? Understand media knows that we all love to watch these stories, and we love it when they feel really credible. I mean, look, we're doing an episode ourselves because we know we love doing it. You love watching it. It's a brilliant, brilliant story. But just take out some of those, I guess, very firm ideas of credibility, and it just starts to fall to bits. And I think that's what happens here. Early days for him, and there is nothing that he's saying that really finishes or has any tonality or any body language of credibility around it, from my point of view. I don't know whether you guys see anything else.
I agree with you completely, because if you were to when you just listen to it, all you're hearing is this stop and start and stop and start, and it's really tricky. And whether he's making that part up there on the spot, I don't know, but that's just automatically sends bells and whistles off in my world for that. I can't get past that. Chase, what do you got?
What I think he's doing here is waiting for a nod from the interviewer that his statement's complete. So this stop and start, I think, is the interviewers are staring at it. So he keeps looking back to the interviewer and saying, "Oh crap, I'm not done yet." The walls were freshly painted, and it looked like a pretty new building. Looks back to the interviewer, and I would probably guess the building was this many years old. So I think that he's not getting much back from the interviewer, so he's continuing to go, which is a fantastic tactic for you, Scott, as an interrogator. I'm giving you guys advice and no one else. If you're in an interrogation and you just maintain that silence, you would be shocked at how much stuff keeps coming out. But what happens when you do that silence is you'll see a stop, start of information. And you got to be brave to do the silencing. It's one thing to read about it on a LinkedIn job interview article. It's a whole other deal to do it in real life. And it's
30 seconds is an eternity. Yes.
Oh, yeah, you're not kidding, because that's when they start adding what he did. What you're explaining is he's adding those qualifiers to it. Yeah. That's we talked about that in our last video, I think, how when you just pause and wait, you ask the question, just sit there and keep looking at them, they'll start adding things to it. That's when we talked about breaking eye contact and all those types of things. Greg, what do you got?
But that's advanced interrogation. Now, guys, here's where I'm going to show you that Bob Lazar is not telling you the truth. This is going to be really easy for you to make a decision about, forget us. You're going to go back after you watch this and watch Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, on that show, Joe Rogan asks good, hard questions and forces this guy to answer them. And when he answers them, he does that rote memory thing almost every time. When he gets in a bind, his eyes dodge away to his left. Now, go back, watch what we just watched. It's bigger than simply request for approval. And he does plenty of that, where he raises his forehead and stares right at, I'm staring at Chase on my screen to try to get approval, but it's bigger than that. When he is saying it, the reason he's stuttering through it is he goes to his visual construct. Watch him. His eyes go up hard and to his left as he's making up the details about freshly painted, and then he shops his answer, something we've talked about in past videos. It's 3, 4, it's 5, it's 7 years, but he's up left, accessing, creating what it looked like so he can describe it, pulls back down, looks dead at you. Now, that could be his baseline for truth. If it is, then this isn't that he's doing on Rogan all the time. What, in fact, I'm seeing here is you hit it dead on. This is the infant version, Mark. This is the infant version of Lazar, and he's creating the story, and people are helping him. He's shopping the story. They're poking holes in it, and he's filling in the holes. This is how cover stories work and that kind of thing. You fill them in. Then he's got it down to rote, and he just and he backs away. He chaffs and redirects all the things we're talking about earlier. Go back and watch him now using that, and you'll see a very different thing than you saw watching him without all that knowledge.
I'm going to bring up one point, too. I agree with you 100%. But I'm going to bring up one point about that thing Mark was talking about where his mouth keeps going. He does that from day one. Yep. He does it on both sides from at day one, I guess we'll call it 1989 interview. But if you see him, he does it on every interview that he's in. So I think, and I'm bringing that up because I think most people will think that the people who aren't as deep into the stuff as we are, they're going to think that's duping delight or duper's delight. And I don't think that's what we're seeing there. We see it a couple of times. Yeah, but that's part of it. That's part of what he's doing. It's either his a tick or whatever, but he does that quite often. So I want to point that out because it just kept bugging the squat out of me. But because I know people say, "Oh, it's duper's delight," but I don't believe that's what it is. Chase?
So I agree that I've seen body language experts on YouTube say that this is duper's delight. There's contempt, facial expression. It's a baseline is all it is.
Quirky.
Yeah, it's just a quirky dude.
I would just add to that. What's great about when you see him with Rogan is he's softened a lot of that. He's so much more calm and assertive.
Contained.
And that's why he gives such a good performance in the Rogan show. He locks himself down. He locks his chair down, pretty much locks his face down to a certain extent. And it's only when he gets asked to do routines that he doesn't want to do anymore, because they would be easier to take apart, that he seems to have an issue with it.
There's an interesting thing as you watch him through here. They go to this science that's accepted science, and they'll use things like, well, gravity waves. He first talked about them and they weren't proven. Well, Einstein talked about gravity waves, and he's been dead longer than we've been alive. So let's not pretend that because something's been proven that he talked about that he invented it. But that's one of their go-tos, to redirect and pull you back into it. And they even get Rogan on at one time where they talk about gravity waves not being discovered until 2016, and he was talking about it in 89, but that's a misdirect.
Yeah, well, you'll see in the Rogan show what happens later on is they talk about a device that can measure the bones in your hand to tell that it's.
I used to work for that company.
Right. So here's the thing. What happens with that is because they produce a real one, and because then Bob is able to go, there, you see, I told you. Now everything's true. But that's not how logic works. That's like me saying, I rode for Cambridge in the Oxford and Cambridge, and you go, but there's no details about that. And then suddenly, and you can't get any history of me ever in a rowing club, but then suddenly somebody comes along with an oar with my name on it. And I go, you see, an oar with my name on, therefore everything is correct. No, it just means there's an oar with your name on. So it's a brilliant way, and I think that is kind of purposely revealed in the Rogan show later on, in order that it makes everything that we've heard before accurate and correct. I think, I'm a big fan. After watching this, I'm a big fan of Bob Lazar because I think it's brilliant what he does. In the same way that Uri Geller is brilliant and was brilliant in his time. I mean, there's a very specific lie there, which he's telling you stuff that isn't true, but sometimes the beauty of the story is more important than whether it's a lie or not. I would say the idea that it might be possible, just like you guys, I would love to live in a world where alien life is possible. And so somebody tells me a decent story about it, I'm open to the story. I'm open to living in the idea of it. Now, is it true? Well, from looking at Bob, his story isn't true. That's not true. Might it be generally true that aliens exist? I actually just don't know. I'd love it if they did, and I'm open to some information or evidence of it. I just don't think he has it.
So let me go back just really quick, just to finish up what I was saying, that when we see the evolution of behavior from his younger videos to nowadays, we see an evolution of showmanship. But I think another thing we could potentially be seeing is the evolution of a mask that was created by somebody that might be on the spectrum. Because we could see that in an adult who's on the spectrum when they're 50, which is Silicon Valley is full of those kinds of people. And they get more and more socially intelligent and very sharpened to understand exactly what people need to see and hear as they age, which I'm only presenting as a possibility.
No. I will say this. That's entirely a possibility. I don't think as much engagement as he had socially in the beginning. I think what brought him to the game is that ability to socially engage. Because if you watch his earlier stuff, the guy's engaging. He is very engaging. Oh, yeah. There's a smirk to him all the time, but he's engaging. And you don't typically think of people on the spectrum as being that engaged. You also don't think of a lot of that, right? And he's got a lot of that. His face is a circus early in the thing.
Yeah, I think his eyebrow. We were seeing too much eyebrow movement for that as well.
Yeah. But I think it's possible, yes. But I don't think he is that guy.
Right.
Definite possibility. But if you are watching this video, one of the things that one of the interviewers could have done, as us interrogators sometimes do, it's called incomplete leading questions or incomplete questions. And we say, so then you walked in the building and...
Rogan does that. Rogan does some of that.
Yeah, I heard a couple of those. We didn't have any here in our clips that we reviewed. But those are fantastic. They're not necessarily leading questions because you're not putting information there. So you're saying you guys left and then everybody...
Bridge.
And you just kind of dot. You leave that gap there for the other person to fill in. And that is a very powerful questioning technique that you can use today if you like.
Well, all right. Well, that's everything. So why don't we throw it around the room, run around one time, and we'll give everyone's perspective on what you think the percentage of truth is versus deception. Greg, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'm not even going to pretend that I believe there's truth in this story. I'm not going to pretend that he worked in an alien aircraft factory. I'm not going to pretend any of that. What I'm going to tell you is fantastic job of storytelling. Really masterful. He knows his routine. You watch him, if you hadn't seen the earlier stuff where you're seeing him access and think and create on the fly, you wouldn't know that he is just repeating something he's rehearsed over and over. That's why I called him Susan Lucci. He's been doing the same role for 35 years. He should be good at it, and he should get better. And he's maturing, and he is stabilizing it so he doesn't move around as much as you do when you're young. It's part of what we see. When I interrogate a general, I wouldn't expect the same thing I got from a private, right? Very different mindset. Very different level of calm. It doesn't make me believe him anymore. It makes me believe him less, that he always goes to the same place. I'm going to leave you with this. Eye movement is contentious. The four of us have differing opinions of it at times. I'm going to tell you that you can't have it both ways. You can't have a baseline that says I always go here, except when I'm asked a hard question, and then I go there.
Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I love Bob Lazar. I especially like him on the Joe Rogan show because he does such a masterful job on that, apart from a few areas. So, yeah, great entertainer, great interviewee. Has he ever seen an alien spacecraft? No, he just hasn't. It's not happened.
Chase, what do you got?
I think he believes some of this. And I think there may be some truth to the fact that he did work in a building or had a security clearance or something like this, which helps him to catapult the rest of his own belief in the rest of the story. I think we're at 50-50 truth and deception here. And it's just from the videos we watched, it's not 100% to say which is deceptive and which is truthful. But I think that he does believe a lot of what he's saying. That's why we're not seeing a lot of stress and emotion there when he's responding to interviewers.
All right. Well, I think we're seeing a combination of truth and deception. I'm with Greg. I'm not going to pretend I believe that this cat saw a bunch of spaceships at all. And I like to, a lot of the comments we get are, did you not do your research and not look into this cat? Remember we talked about before we started recording, we talked about his past and things that have been going on. When a person has a past that's chock full of deception in the ways his was, I believe that's what we're seeing. We're seeing somebody who knows how to tell a story because their background shows they've been telling those stories for a long time, not just since he was a kid, but as an adult as well. After he'd already come out with this is when he got in some trouble as well. And I don't think he saw any spaceships. I don't think he saw the maps he's talking about. I don't think he saw any of that. I think he's just creating a story, and that's what we're seeing. Great guy, awesome storyteller. I'm down with you on that one, but I don't think we're seeing. I don't think this happened the way he says it happened, or that it happened to him like that.
Love us or hate us, that's what we saw.
Yeah, we call him like we see him. If we see deception, we'll say we see deception here, here, and here. If we see truth, we say we see truth here, here, and here. We're not on anybody's side. Like Chase said, I want there to be UFOs so bad. I want to see little green men. Or gray men. I want to see all that. I want it to be truth. I want that to happen. We're not detectives, as Greg says. We're just relaying how things look to us, and that's it. All right. All right.
Thanks.
So pretty good.
Yeah, that was a fun one, actually. Yeah.
All right. Well, then I'll see you guys on the next one.
Good.
Here's the question I wanted to bring up in the video. Why are aliens always naked when they're being described?
What if that is the spacesuit? What if this is the
like
goggles and that's the suit?
Well, yeah, because we're thinking about 1960s technology with a big...
But when I see stuff like that, that makes me think maybe that's their uniform, in other words.